Everybody joining me on the podcast today. It feels like a yearly visit during the summer we have every single year, and that is Barry McKnight, voice of the Troy Trojans. You can hear him every morning from 7 to 10 over on 740 Sports Radio in Montgomery. And Barry, as always, appreciate you taking time.
Yeah, anytime. Always look forward to this, Phillip. Every summer, and really anytime you need me, for sure.
And just for you, I mean, I know you just not too long baseball season ended, but during the summertime we're getting closer and closer to football season. Just how exciting of a time is that in Troy right now?
Well, it really is because of the fact that you really don't feel like you had a full dose of a full football season in 2 years. Last year, Troy got 11 games in. They had scheduled 12. The last one didn't get played, and it was. I'm not going to say it's difficult because doing what we do for a living is not like, digging ditches or laying sod or something like that. But it was challenging. You had to broadcast with a lot of restrictions up there, a lot of things we couldn't do up there. But the most challenging thing was there's not much of a crowd. And, in our business, and you've done this before, you use the crowd as background noise. You kind of play it a little bit. You turn it up on a big moment, you lay out a little bit to let the crowd noise take over. Well, we really couldn't do that last year. So yeah, this year, looking forward to having crowds back at the vet, looking forward to being full blast with tailgating and with all of the things we do. And the good thing is, finally we get to a year at Troy where there are no shackles on fan participation and all that. And we really should be really very good.
Here in Dothan, I see the billboards that say "Pack the Vet," and that billboard just feels like it takes on a whole different meaning for this upcoming season.
There was a study that was done, or a poll that was done a few years back that, Veterans Memorial Stadium in Troy is not the biggest football venue in the Sun Belt Conference. It's not located in the biggest market, but they voted Troy as having the best overall fan atmosphere and best overall fan experience. And that's the one thing you kind of have the most control over is what you offer to the fan base. Bottom line, it's good football, and Troy has been fortunate to play a lot of good football, especially at home. But, the venue itself, the vet, there's not a bad seat in the whole place. The fans are right there on the field, it feels like. There's such great ambiance inside there and always entertainment going on. So, yeah, when you pack the vet, all 30,000 seats, and when you get that thing full, it's rocking a lot more than most 30,000 seat stadiums ever would.
Yeah, and you kind of allude to it a little bit, but when you were, doing games last year, any of the sports really, when you had the lack of fans in the stadium, if there is a big moment, you're used to fans and a roar. You don't have that. Does that play an impact? How hard is that with those moments, or to kind of, because you don't have that feed off the fans?
It's difficult. I mean, it's not as difficult as as having a full house and they're not very active, but you're always mindful of the crowd noise in the back. You want to play to that as much as you can. And it just wasn't there. It was a little off-putting. You're thinking, wow, that should have sounded different. I'll give you an example. We were so enthused last year once the secondary schedule came out. After the initial schedule was canceled, Brent Jones, our AD, got really busy, and he secured a road game at BYU. I think it was week 2 or week 3. And we were pretty psyched up about that. We went to the summer. We didn't know that we were going to go to BYU, but all of a sudden it fell into our laps. And we're going to BYU, which beautiful venue, great football. You've got the mountains really just jam up right behind the stadium, and the fans have always had a great reputation of being active. There was not a single fan in the stands, not one. At Troy, we had limited capacity. I think it was 25%. Some schools had 10%. That's the only school we went to where they did not allow any fans in there. And you're there and you're excited, and boy, this is BYU. This is great and everything. And the game's going on, and we're up. It's a big stadium. We're up, way up there, and you could hear the quarterback calling signals and things like. So excited to be there, excited, for the game to take place. But it was like doing a game out in the parking lot somewhere. So it was definitely different to try to sell, to try to represent the excitement that we felt and that Troy felt we have an opportunity to play in a venue like that against a team like that. But it was deathly quiet.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I think friends on Facebook as well. Did you have to call games that you were not at?
We had to in basketball, which was difficult. But again, very fortunate. We were at every football game, and a lot of programs, a lot of Division 1A programs could not say that. For basketball, it turns out of the whole schedule, and we did every game, there was only about 6 games that we had to do remotely, including a game at Auburn, which would have been really easy for us to get to. But there was there's just no substitute for being there. There are fouls called, and we're scrambling trying to figure out who the foul was called against 90 miles away. I was talking to Andy Burcham, the voice of the Auburn Tigers, who's one of my all-time great friends. I've known him, and we've worked together for years and years and years. And he was talking about it. They didn't get to go to a single road game anywhere. The SEC didn't have any visiting radio in any venue for any game all season. So, I've made up my mind. I'm not going to complain about any of it. It wouldn't do any good. But like anything else, any other difficulty in life, there's always somebody who's got it worse than you do.
Yeah. So, looking at the Troy team for this coming up season, and I was doing my prep, and last year, I know they went 5-6 last year, but this team was close to 9 wins because 4 of those losses, 16 points. The Coastal Carolina game, I remember seeing that one.
Right.
I was on the edge of my seat that one. And this team is 10 of 11 starters coming back on the offense. Defense, I have a lot of guys coming back. I mean, there's playmakers all over this team. I mean, Troy, they are super talented coming into the season.
I mean, I look at it, and this upcoming year, Phillip, will be my 20th year doing play-by-play for Troy football. And I look at it, and I've been working, kind of getting my spotting charts ready, although there's no 2D that has been released yet. And I'm looking, and I'm just very excited about the talent on there. You mentioned last year, and you don't want to make excuses. 5-6 is 5-6, but there were 2.5 games without the starting quarterback. Coach Lindsey missed a game and a half, really, because of the virus. B.J. Smith, who was the preseason conference offensive player of the year before, didn't play anything but the first couple of. He was never full speed, and the team itself had so many hoops to jump through in terms of the COVID virus, and you just wonder what would have happened if Gunnar Watson had been able to play in the second half of the Georgia State game, had been able to play against Georgia Southern. Jacob Free came in and did a terrific job against Arkansas State, but not as experienced as Gunnar had been. You wonder what would have happened if, some of the guys on defense had not had to sit out games. So if you look at this team with a full roster of players that they had last year, and some of the new guys they've got coming in this year, some grad transfers, some guys out of the transfer portal, you can't help but get excited.
Yeah, and you brought up, running back. I mean, you got B.J. Smith, you got, Vidal. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. The receivers, Reggie Todd there for one, Geiger at receiver. The whole offensive line's coming back, and you've got a good situation at quarterback. I mean, you mentioned, Gunnar Watson, and and then you got the Missouri transfer coming in.
Yeah, Taylor Powell. Remember that name? I'm glad you brought him up because who knows? I mean, he still is locked in a battle, but he's going to have every chance to win that job. In competition at that position or any position really makes you better. So I'm really interested to see some of those new faces for sure, and the return of some of those old faces. So B.J. Smith is entering his 6th year. Yeah, I've seen him a couple of times this summer. He looks terrific at running back, and with him and Vidal and D.K. Billingsley, who almost ran for 1,000 yards 2 years ago, and Jamontez Woods and Charles Strong, the guy who transferred in from Texas A&M a couple of years ago, plus the receivers, Reggie Todd, guys like Tez Johnson. There's going to be some firepower on that offensive side of the ball. I'm just looking forward to it.
Yeah, they're going to have some good matchups, but defense. I mean, they've got guys over there too as well. And, I know they're looking to improve on that side of the ball, and but they've got some playmakers looking through that lineup, especially in the front seven. I mean, up front at the front four, the defensive line and at linebacker, of course.
You got again. This is another one where a couple of the transfer portal guys may really weigh in. The known commodity you've mentioned. We're talking about Will Cholo. At defensive tackle, you've got Richard Gibonor, Javon Solomon, the Bandits over there. Both of them can really run. And of course, Carlton Marshall, who to me is the best football player on this team and maybe the best football player Troy has had in the last 8 or 9 years. He was named as Pro Football Focus's 41st best football player in the country at middle linebacker. He's 2-time all-conference, and one of my favorite people, Jaden McDonald, who transferred in from Iowa, had a great year. KJ Robertson last year, but also a defensive end, a 270-pound defensive end, transferred in from Florida State, named Jamarcus Chapman. Remember that name. He'll really push John Hines there. And there's a linebacker who kind of intrigues me. He was one of the top-rated inside backers in the country coming out of high school down at IMG Academy, went to Michigan. His name's Jordan Anthony. He's a graduate transfer. He's got 1 year of eligibility, 1 year to go, and he's going to play down in Troy. And I haven't seen much tape on him, but I tell you, he's got the look. And then in the defensive backfield, so many really good players. Del Pettis has gained about 20 pounds since he came to Troy. He's an all-conference safety. Craig Slocum back there, Daryl Starling, Marquise Colvin, a safety who was hurt the entire year last year. They say a lot of good things about him. And Reddy Stewart at one cornerback position. And, there's a lot to be excited about. But, here we are. We're recording this in mid-July, and there's a lot of time between now and then to try to find some of the answers to what looks to me to be a log jam of talent at just about every position.
Yeah, I've got the Troy schedule in front of me, but I wanted to ask when the schedule, especially, what's coming ahead. Is there ever a time, when you look at it, I am really looking forward to broadcasting this game on the schedule?
Well, there's a couple of things that jumped out at me when you asked me that. Number one, my academic background, I went to school at the University of Florida, and I went to school and I finished up school at Auburn. And whenever I was a kid, my whole family was Gators, except for one sister. My parents went to school there. My sister, my brother, I went to school there. And when I was a little kid, I used to go to all the football camps every summer. And the first time, and I always thought that, when I'm down there on the football camp at Florida Field, if I could ever get up there, I'd be the happiest man. Well, I've called 2 games against the University of Florida in Gainesville, and just to be up there was something that it was kind of like a bucket list deal for me. I'd always wanted to be up there. I'd spent so much time in the stands and so much time down on the field that it really was meaningful for me. But really, the whole experience. This is what I've always been in radio or TV. I've always been in broadcasting. This is what I've always wanted to do ever since I was a little kid, doing the PA at 11 or 12 years old at the youth league games. This is what I always thought that I'd be well suited to do. So every time I get up there, and I've called, I think, 223 straight Troy football games, every time I go up there, I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to be up there and to earn my living in this way.
Yeah, I remember the first game I did high school. I was almost, I was just doing stats, and I helped a little bit at halftime, but it's like, I'm up, it was at Rip Hughes Stadium, just a high school game.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and I tell people too, I do podcasts, we're taping this if we mess up, but when you're live on the radio, there is a rush to that. Just as my little bit of experience doing high school football.
The thing that's to me a real key, at least it's been a key to me, is I know that rush. My first college football game I ever broadcast on the radio. I'd done a lot of college games on television, but the first game I ever did as the voice of somebody was August 31st, 2002. And I had told myself that, my goal was to be a college voice by the time I was 40. Well, August 31st, 2002, my 40th birthday was the next day. and it was at Nebraska. And here I am. I had gotten the job late. I'd gotten the job 1st of August, and the first game is August 31st. And so I was scrambling in there, and here I am at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, Nebraska, Troy State versus Nebraska. And you get that rush, and you get really hyper-focused. Okay, here we go. This is what I've got to do and everything. But the key to me is the last game I did, that Coastal Carolina game last year, had 30,000 seat Veterans Memorial Stadium. You get that same rush. You still have that same, okay, here I am. This is what I'm focused on. Coastal is looking for an undefeated season. Troy's looking to gain bowl eligibility. They've got, a great quarterback. Troy has got a great defense. What are the important? The focus and the juice from the very first game I did, I'm fortunate this way, is still the same focus and the same juice I have for my 223rd game.
And one of the games I look at schedule and I look at that second game, Liberty.
Yes.
In Troy. I have a feeling that's going to be fun.
Well, I'm looking forward to it for a lot of different reasons. I remember well when Neil Brown took a Troy team up there, and Troy was rolling at that time, took a team up to Liberty, and it's a breathtaking venue. Everything is spotless. Everything is brand new, and they beat us. They had a quarterback named Buckshot Calvert, and we could not stop him down the stretch. Hugh Freeze's first year as the coach. And I'm telling you, that was an impressive group. We were unprepared for that. So there's some redemption. There's some revenge that plays into it. Plus, they had gotten so much notoriety last year for the season that they had. And you got a chance to watch them and learn a little bit about them and their win against North Carolina State and their win in the bowl game. And you're thinking, this is going to be a really salty bunch. Malik Willis is going to be as good of a quarterback as Troy will face this year. That's a challenge there. So I'm looking forward to that. It's kind of a litmus test for this program in week number 2, and I don't anticipate an empty seat at the Vet for that one for sure.
Well, that's when I looked at. I said, okay, I try to go to a Troy game at least one a year. Did make it one last year because of everything. So that's the one that's on top of the list of one I want to go to.
That's a good one to go to, without a doubt.
Oh, when you look at the Sun Belt, we talked a little bit off air about this. I mean, especially the east side of the conference. I mean, I think you look at it, all 5 of the programs have been, contenders in the Sun Belt over the last couple of years. And I know with Coastal Carolina, bring about pretty much a lot of their players, Grayson McCall, the quarterback, Jamie Chat, well, he coming back, and then you got, Troy's there. You've got Appalachian State with Chase Bryce coming in. I mean, it is a, we talked about, like I said, off air, there's a lot of depth to this conference, and there's no easy out week in and week out in the Sun Belt.
People ask me, Phillip, all the time about, what's the main difference in the Sun Belt Conference from 2006 when Troy entered the Sun Belt Conference. And that's what I always bring up. Back in those days, particularly in those days with Coach Blakeney, when Troy won 5 conference championships in a row, what's the difference between then and now? Well, back then, quite honestly, Troy could go into some of those Sun Belt venues and knew they did not have to play their best in order to win the game. Now you have better play your best, because not only will you not win, you'll get run out of the stadium. Today, as it turns out, I cast my ballots for the Sun Belt preseason teams, the all-conference teams, and the finish. And the one thing that I wish was different in the Sun Belt was that it is really top-heavy in the East. Louisiana is my choice to win the league. They are the only club in the West that I think is a well-rounded team. In the East, gosh, I'm trying to decide between Coastal Carolina, but then there's Appalachian State. Georgia Southern has won the league before, has won the division before and gone on. Georgia State is really up and coming. They've beaten Troy twice in a row, and then Troy. So it's a coin flip, really. If you try to look at differences in there, a couple of the schools that Troy is really battling. Appalachian State is in Troy. Georgia Southern comes to Troy. There's a Thursday night game at Coastal Carolina that scares me to death. The last Thursday in October, South Alabama comes to Troy. Louisiana comes to Troy. So if you're looking for small differences that could mean a difference in a win or a loss, having those teams come to Troy is a huge advantage. But other than that, there's not much difference at all at the top of this league, particularly in this division.
Yeah, and I just gotta say, I'm looking at the schedule. I know I understood last year. I kind of missed that midweek South Alabama game.
It's always been midweek. It's always been either a Wednesday or a Thursday, and that's for TV. And I understand it. I get that. I'm not going to complain about that. But as a broadcaster, the midweek game with your biggest rival it's difficult. Any midweek game is difficult, particularly a midweek road game. This year, South Alabama's on a Saturday, which is where it needs to be because it's such a rivalry game. But, Troy is fortunate, as I mentioned, with so many of those really good teams coming to Troy this year, but they're also fortunate in the fact there's only one midweek game, but that's a big one. That's at Coastal Carolina, but that comes after an off week. So South Alabama is such a different deal. The programs have gotten to this point differently. Troy has had a lot more football history than South Alabama has. They're different campuses. They're different types of schools. They're different in just about everything. So, for us, it's a bigger school. South Alabama's got more students. They've got more alums. They've probably got a bigger budget than we do, but we've always done well against them in football. And the Troy fans really, really need to keep that going. This is what they're really rooting for. So everything you can want in a rivalry game, it's a Saturday, it's two teams with something to prove. South Alabama's got a new coach. This is going to be, and for Troy, it's right after that Coastal Carolina game and right ahead of that Louisiana game. So, I'm not saying Troy's going to lose focus, but if there's a scenario that's a sandwich game in this schedule, it's that South Alabama between Coastal Carolina and Louisiana.
Yeah, I'll look forward any day of the week it's on. But I did. I went to the last one that was in the middle of the week. It was on Wednesday, and that was a good experience too on that one. Now, something too, this kind of our college football headline, going in is the talk of the 12-team playoff, which, it'll be a couple years before we actually see it. And, and for, teams in the Sun Belt, like last year, maybe Coastal Carolina could have made a run. They would have been in the playoff. Coastal Carolina would have been a playoff team. Louisiana would have been in the discussion, I think, as well. Just what's your overall thoughts on the expansion going from the 4 to the 12?
Well, I was not a fan of expansion. I was one of these happy-go-lucky guys that just liked college football. I was not unhappy with the bowl system and all that. So when you got to the BCS or the Bowl Alliance at first and the BCS, I thought, well, this still kind of keeps the old feel of college football. The 14 playoff came, and that was going to be about my limit. That was about, okay, this is about, to my mind, there's never really more than 4 teams in any one season that really deserves a shot at a national championship after the regular season. And I thought that if there was going to be a progression, like everybody else, I thought it would be to 8 teams, which I was totally not for because, like you said, the access for group of 5 schools is non-existent in a 4-team. And for those people who kept trying to tell me, yeah, but if it's an 8-team, you can have your 5 conference champions and 3 at-large bids, so maybe a group of 5 school can get in there. I'm not believing them. I'm thinking, no. I know how the group of 5, how the Power 5 works. If you got 3 at-larges, they're going to go to 3 Power 5 schools. I wasn't buying that as an argument for an 8-team playoff. But with a 12-team, there's a couple of things that I like. And I never thought I'd say this because I was okay with 4. And now I'm okay with just totally leapfrogging 8 and going to 12 for 2 things. Number one, I do think it provides a gateway for not just 1, but maybe 2 group of 5 schools to get in there. And last year, of course, gosh, you had Liberty, you had Coastal Carolina, you had Houston, you had Cincinnati. All of those were viable programs. So you have more with the 12-team playoff, more access to group of 5 schools. But also, I thought it was very smart that they said that there will be berths for the top 6 rated conferences, not the power. It's not SEC, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, and ACC. necessarily unless they're among the top 6 highest rated conferences. What that means to me is that a conference like the Pac-12 can't just automatically have somebody get in there just strictly because of that. Last year, the Pac-12 would not have had a representative. Oregon would not have made it in last year as one of the, because they were not a top 6 rated conference. So I like that a lot. What that means is that, let's just say the Sun Belt is really, really strong this year, and they get up and they leapfrog the Pac-12 or they leapfrog the Big 12 and get in among the top 6. That's an automatic berth for the Sun Belt Conference and a possibility at an at-large bid for another Sun Belt Conference team. So I like the access, and I like the fact that they're not just issuing a free ticket to some of those conferences, particularly the Pac-12, which you got to admit has not really been deserving of any avenue into a postseason championship conversation.
Yeah, they have it. This is the thing. I guess it helps them a little bit now. They could get a team in, but I mean, when's the last time they had one in? I'm trying to think. I think
it was Oregon a few years ago,
and Washington. That one year,
Washington, yeah,
and they got beat by Alabama.
Right, but
they got blown out. I mean, I know a lot of Alabama does that to a lot of people in the first round games, but yeah, it's been a while for them. And I just, and I was about to just let's don't award a 9-3 or a potential 8-4 conference champion
at the expense of an 11-1 or a 12 or a 10-2 conference runner-up. If the idea is to get the best teams you can into that playoff, you don't get the best teams by awarding automatic bids to anybody. Really, you've got to earn it in, and then let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, so it's gonna be interesting when it gets here. We got to wait a few years on when we do get it.
And that's a big question there as well. When is it going to happen? The contract doesn't end. The current contract doesn't end until 2025. But, if the money is what I think it's going to be, they can amend that contract. They can settle that contract. So maybe it'll be 2026 when we first see it, but it would not surprise me, Phillip, if it's more like 2024 or 2023, possibly.
Yeah, I feel like when they do agree on everything, they're going to get this thing going quick as they can.
Sure.
Yeah. So, last before I let you go, I told you about this before we got going.
Right.
I want to end it with 5 questions. And Barry, are you ready for 5 questions?
I have no idea what these are all about, but let's jump in. Here we go.
All right. Now, this is probably something I asked you probably the first time I had you on the podcast. But, just growing up, you said what you always want to do. Who is your favorite broadcaster?
Well, my favorite broadcaster, without a doubt, people give me a hard time about it, but it's Vin Scully. I've always, when I grew up in Central Florida, in a little town called Palm Bay, Florida, which is about 20 miles north of Vero Beach, where the Dodgers used to train at Dodger Town. And I used to go down there all the time. And I saw Vin Scully come out of the booth one time at Dodger Town, immaculate with his white linen suit and everything. And I thought, that must be the best thing in the world to be. And I've listened to him ever since. I've always enjoyed it. If I could have a barometer on what I wanted to sound like or how I wanted to handle any situation, I'd always ask myself, what would Vin Scully do?
All right, that's awesome. And he is one of the giants of broadcasting. All right, number 2. Now, you've covered a lot of events, but if there's an event out there that you have not done that you would like to cover.
I would love to see Troy, obviously, in the playoff. I would love to see that. But other than that, I've said this before as well, and I don't really know why this intrigues me so much. In a football sense, I would love to broadcast Harvard-Yale. I would love to do that. And, I'm no Harvard fan. I'm no Yale fan or anything like that, but I would just like to see pure football. There's no scholarships. There's very little budgets. The fans don't live and die on everything. It's just pure competitive football because they love to do it. Other than that, in terms of something outside of football or outside of my comfort zone, I used to spend a lot of time on television and a lot of time doing public address in gymnastics. I was always kind of known as a gymnastics guy on television. If it was a gymnastics meet, let's get Barry to do it. I would love to call Olympic gymnastics. I think that would be very interesting. Men's and women's, the whole deal. I think I could handle it, but just to be able to do it I think it would be pretty cool.
That's good. Hey, and the Olympics are coming up, so that ties everything in
Yep.
here on the podcast. Okay, now, so number 3, and this is probably something I've asked you before, but favorite moment of a game that you've called?
Favorite moment of a game that I've called? I would have to say 2017, the LSU game. And which is kind of cheating a little bit, Phillip, because it was more than a moment.
Yeah.
It was the whole game. I remember before the game getting out, and we get there early and sitting out there and just kind of taking it all in and the opportunity ahead of us. The first play of the game, LSU fumbled, Troy recovered, go down, they score and everything. And during the break, I said, okay, boys, this is going to get interesting. At the very end, and this is kind of a cliche for me, for anybody who knows my work, at the very end, LSU's driving. Troy has gone several times to LSU and lost late. LSU's driving with Danny Etling, the quarterback. They go downfield. It's a 3rd down, and Etling throws the interception to Blaise Brown. And I don't know where this came from, but I said, God bless you, Blaise Brown. And at that moment, you knew that they were going to win this game. There was nothing LSU could do. You look over across the way, you see the people leaving. That was, I got to admit, that was pretty sweet.
I remember hearing that call. So I remember that very well. So this question is kind of the same, but it's kind of different. So I want to take you back, when you got into broadcasting.
Mm-hmm.
But as a fan growing up, is there a sports memory that sticks out to you from that?
That goes back a little ways. Let me think. A sports memory before I ever got involved in this, I was a freshman. This is how old I've gotten. When I was a freshman at the University of Florida, I went to the Florida-Georgia game, and which was not too obviously just right up the road from where I was going to school. I went with a buddy of mine, sat in the end zone, and Herschel Walker was a freshman, and he ran for 291 in that game against Florida. But Florida was leading late. And in the end zone, I was sitting in. I could have reached out and touched the Georgia offensive line. It felt like they were on my end zone, in my side. And Buck Ballou dropped back, and he threw a crossing pattern. I could see it developing, and he threw it to Lindsey Scott. Lindsey Scott was about 20 yards away from me. And then I lost him in the sidelines over there, and everybody was going crazy down in the far corner. And I thought, somebody tackle him. What's going on? Lindsey Scott ran for a touchdown. The famous run, Lindsey, run call from Larry Munson. It was not a favorite sports memory, but it was certainly indelible, because I thought at that point that I would never be happy again, that there's nobody talked to me, anything like that. I loved college football so much. And my brother, who's a sports writer for Sports Illustrated, we're such a sports family, and he went to school at Florida too later after me. We just were inconsolable. And it was at that time we started to really think, man, this is deeply ingrained in all of us. And subsequently, we've been fortunate enough to broadcast sports and write about sports ever since. The good stuff, sure, but there's also moments when it just guts you and you feel terrible and you're never going to get any better. And then after a day or so, you can't wait to get back out there and see another one.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think, as a sports fan, you feel those moments. You live with that team, and then when, especially the moment when you think you're about to win and it gets pulled from you. So,
all right.
I guess real quickly, the closest. I'm a big Green Bay Packers fan.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if you remember when they played the Seahawks a few years ago in the NFC Championship game. That's kind of one of my recent moments, I guess.
That was the one where one referee said it was an interception, the other referee said it was a catch in the end zone. Sorry. You're thinking, yeah, Barry, thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate that. I was going to try to gloss by it, Barry, but yeah, that's the game.
Yeah, then the onside kick that got dropped, that if they catch it, they just run the clock out.
That's right.
They win it. So,
yep.
Yeah, trust me, that I could. Unfortunately, I remember that game vividly as a fan. So, so the final question, and this is the fun one. This is the fun one. I think those 4 questions just lead up to this one.
All right.
Number 5, best stadium food.
Best stadium food, believe it or not, best stadium food we ever had was at New Mexico State. They have, it's in the desert. It's maybe 25 miles north of Mexico, about 35 miles west of Texas. They have the best Tex-Mex food in there. You couldn't go to a famous Texan Mexican food restaurant anywhere and have it better than that. I'm not a huge Mexican food guy, but they did three things. Jerry Miller's our food expert. He's the one that could probably answer that question a lot more deeply than I can. Number one, they give you a lot of it. Number two, you can eat it quickly. You can eat it with your fingers, because normally we do it either right before the game starts or right at halftime. You know what that's like. You got to get it and get it quick. Yeah. And number three is that they always put a lot of cheese on it. That's always good. So people wonder about that, but yeah, New Mexico State, believe it or not, they really had it going on.
Hey, cheese on most stuff is good. So that's cheese and bacon. If you have those two ingredients, you're pretty much good on the food, pretty much whatever you're eating. So anyways, I appreciate Barry, you coming on the show today. Like I said, we do this. It feels like it once a year during the summertime. I always appreciate you coming on. And just, if people want to follow you online, where they can find you, where they can find and listen to the Troy Trojans this fall, and where they can hear you every morning.
Well, we get started really, next week is SEC Media Days, which is really when our talk show broadcast calendar for football really starts. It's on Sports Radio 740, AM 740 in Montgomery. I've been doing it now for 24 years with John Longshore. You can go online at sportsradio740.com. As you mentioned before, 7 to 10 in the morning. And if you ever want to follow me on Twitter, it's just simple as Twitter at Barry McKnight. We have a lot of content about Troy and about different topics that we go on as well there. And of course, my website, if you're a broadcaster and you want to check out some of the stuff, some of the resources that I post on there, that's just at barrymcknight.com.
All right. Sounds good, Barry. And once again, I appreciate you coming on, and I hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Already looking forward to the next time, Phillip.
Ooh.